Well, Yo, it's a real pleasure to have you today. You have a very rich career with data. Maybe you can tell us a few words about that from your past with BNP and now with Valipac and Residata.
Thank you, Patrick, for having me. Yes, it's true. I've had a lifelong relationship with this topic, data warehousing. Today, I'm responsible for data and digital services at Valipac and Residata, and we'll talk more about that. And prior to that, I was a chief data officer at BNP Paribas Fortis, also indeed responsible for the challenge of keeping and building data warehouses, amongst many things. And prior to that, I was partner at Deloitte and also an entrepreneur in my own company, having been building data warehouses and business intelligence solutions for most of my life when I think about it.
So you've been around the block of data a few
Yes,
times.
yes.
It's seen many things. All right, thank you very much. Maybe a word of introduction in your own words about Valipac and Residata, what it does, and then when you joined the group, what was the business challenge at hand?
Yes, PAC and Residata, because of the European and Belgian regulation regarding the duties that companies have to take back the waste streams they put on the market. Those waste streams could be products like mattresses or oils, lubricants, but they also could be packaging. So Residata is an overarching organization specializing in setting up those different organizations for different waste streams. Valipac is one of those waste streams, a very big and important one, actually the biggest in Belgium, taking care of all the industrial and commercial packaging.
So
And,
very
and
good for the people, good for the environment,
it,
taking out dangerous
yes,
stuff.
yes, we make sure that society can organize both financially and operationally the challenge of recuperating waste and making the best of it, and not treating waste as waste, but treating waste as a raw material for the next production cycle, basically.
What was the challenge when you joined the company?
The funny thing is that I actually joined 25 years ago for the first time when the companies were created. But we'll zoom forward to me joining 2 years ago after having been away for a long time. The challenge for this company is that we talk about waste in the form of materials, packaging, or lubricants, or mattresses, all those kind of stuff. But to us, they are all data and data items, because if we want to organize those waste streams and the recycling of them, basically what we need to organize is the data collection of what is being put on the market and the data collection of what is being taken off the market, where it goes to, where it is recycled. And we actually are capable today to do a full traceability up until the recycling plants that might be in Turkey or in Thailand or wherever in the world. So we follow, let's say, every kilo of commercial packaging in the context of Valipac from its origination all the way down to its ultimate destination and recycling until it starts a new life, can come back into our system, reincarnated as a new packaging or a new product. But all these steps are basically steps of data. And so what we do is we never touch, we never get our hands dirty, apart from some colleagues who go to verify whether the real waste corresponds to the data streams we get. But most of our people never really get their hands dirty, but they are always dealing with data.
So at the core, it's a traceability business.
Yes, and a money collection business, so money
Okay.
redistribution business, because we need to know what is being put on the market. We need to collect money for that. And with that money, we stimulate the collection and the processing.
Okay.
And so it's a financial stream, but what is a financial stream other than being a data stream? So also the financial stream is essentially a data stream.
All right. But with a noble cause, like positive reinforcement loops.
Yes, but I would like to mitigate the purpose. We don't wake up in the morning to be noble. It's basically a setup that serves the Belgian industry or the European industry. And it's not really out of being noble that we exist, but to really address an operational, legal, and also financial need of the industry. Because as I said, when it started 25 years ago, it was more a legal concern, like a compliance concern. The industry had to take care and prove that they did all this. With everything that's going on in terms of raw material scarcity, it's also becoming really an economic necessity to know where materials are, to be able to understand the flows and the economic realities. And so we are very privileged to see, we really feel the economy. So when it goes bad with the economy, we feel this on either side of our balance sheet. What is put on the market in terms of consumption? How is the demand for recycled materials? So it's really hardcore economics, basically.
Okay, thank you. It's fascinating. So not everybody is familiar with that space,
No.
but now that we hear it, we can totally see the necessity for it. So coming back to the data challenge, what was it? Why are we here today?
To understand the challenge that we attacked a year and a half ago or started attacking, you need to look at the arch of the 25-year history, where we started with a small access database. And for those of you who are old enough,
Yeah, I'm guilty of a few.
a Cognos cube,
Not that one, but another one.
a Cognos cube to understand what was being put on the market. And from day one, there was a need to really understand what was going on a daily basis in the market and where our clients were. And that database and all the processing around it has grown in complexity over 25 years. At a certain point, we had made a good decision, I believe, to embark on a BI as a service offering. And so the organization had outsourced the full operations of processing all that data into insights to an external party, both hardware, but also the development, the front-end software. So that was a BI as a service. And 2 years ago, we had many changes in our operational landscape, core systems that had changed. And when I came on board, I realized that the impact on the 25-year-old data warehouse had not really been scoped. And this may sound familiar to other people. It's, yeah, we'll do the reporting and the data warehouse at the end of the project. Like you hear sometimes with security. We'll do the security at the end. We'll do the BI at the end, because it's basically just reporting.
Here it was the introduction of a new operational system.
And so the operational system was very much impacted. And I came on board, and that had been going on before I came on board. And I realized that there was no budget, no scope to probably do the most important thing, which was to replace the data warehouse, which is what everything runs on. We cannot exist without our business intelligence data warehouse, whatever you call it. Our core activity is that we make sure that our 7,000 clients, and I speak only for Valipac and not speaking for the other organizations that we serve, we make sure that they are compliant with their duty to take back their packaging. If we cannot report that, if we cannot analyze that, and over the 25 years, the Belgian regulator has become very good also at asking more and more analysis and more dimensions and more details and more attributes. If we cannot do that, we have no reason to exist.
That must be their license to operate.
It's a license to operate, absolutely.
And that comes out of the data warehouse, and the data warehouse has not been budgeted, and yet the operational systems are fundamentally changing. I heard you introduced Salesforce, if I remember well.
Yes, but not just as a CRM system. And that was in itself a good decision. We wanted to get all our stakeholders under control and clean up how they interacted with us. That project did a very good job in really defining which stakeholders do we have, where do we put them in Salesforce, which contract types do they have, etc. And that impacted all of our operational systems, and all that had been budgeted. And the reasoning was, since we haven't really impacted the data collection systems, the data warehouse is not changing. But what we had changed was all the way we looked at the intervening parties. So in your reporting, obviously, the intervening parties, whatever they are, clients, suppliers, what we call operators or operational partners, so the people who take away the garbage, if you redefine that, it's like the core dimension of all your analysis.
The data model is changing.
Yeah, if you would speak in dimensions, you probably have the dimension time, which is important in every system. And then there is the dimension stakeholder. And Salesforce had to redefine that, rightfully so, very well done. But we hadn't budgeted putting that through into the data warehouse. So I came in, and that was my reality.
Okay. All right. So what were the options then? How did you think about addressing that issue? Because you could not let it go like this. Otherwise, you run out of business, basically.
Exactly.
How much time did you have?
I was at the end of 2023, which means that the license to operate reporting cycle for 2023 was done on the old system. But I realized that by September 2024, I needed a new solution. And so I had a window of like approximately 9 months, 9 to 10 months, because we were at the November somewhere, 2023. If I would not have a fully operational analytical system by the end of September 2024, we would really be in default vis-a-vis 7,000 of our clients and 200 of our operational partners, and we would lose our credibility. It means also the entirety of the industry. It is vis-a-vis the retailers, vis-a-vis the paper industry, the chemical industry. So it's not just clients, it's also the industrial stakeholders that we represent. So 9 to 10 months window to fix it. And
very high stake.
The default option was modify the existing data warehouse with our external provider to whom we had outsourced the whole system. We had an experience a few months before where we had asked to expand geographically. So we had the experience of asking how much time would we need to go into another geographical area, which simply put would mean how much time does it take to adjust the existing data warehouse to an additional value in the geographical dimension.
So you had a bit of a
We had a
small test.
Yeah, and I will not quote the cost that we would have incurred, but it was substantial and more than 5 figures to basically not change the structure, but add a value. And I'm oversimplifying, and this is because geographical dimension would have consequences in the full data warehouse, etc. But so we were aware that it was not a trivial mission. That was a good warning shot. So we started becoming aware that not only in terms of cost, but that in terms of cost, probably adjusting the data warehouse would cost more than the original project if we would do it the old way. And that, more important, I would never make it on time.
So the old way of doing it, what do you mean?
The old way of doing it is probably the way that still a lot of companies have to do it. It's the way in which projects are set up and operational systems, business logic is changed. And it seems very obvious that then the reporting and the analysis will automatically reflect that. But in between that operational system and that ultimate analysis and reporting sits a whole factory, stepwise factory, ETL factory. So extracting the data, transforming it, loading that. And that is very often, when you open the hood, a very intricate spaghetti of processing on top of good but traditional tools, ETL tools, in our case outsourced, so running as a service, running daily very well. But we, as I said, we had lost the expertise of knowing what happened under the hood. We basically could check the output, and we had a couple of hundreds of reports that had grown over 25 years, but we weren't sure who was using what. So what do you have to change? Close to 100 star schemas, all having grown through time in different variations, and then a big factory leading up to these magical star schemas.
And now the operations system changed fundamentally,
So,
and you need to revisit all that code.
Yeah, and it changes not just with an attribute that we had prior to that known what the cost would be for an attribute. We now know it's changing in a core dimension.
Yeah.
That is also determining who can see what, etc. So the impact had been hugely underestimated as it's a business as usual maintenance thing. I realized this is going to be a project that might be bigger than the original project.
So it feels like an impossible problem to solve with the usual ways of working.
So it's probably possible if you have a lot of time, and time means money. But mainly time was our enemy because the time window was fixed.
Because of the regulator, reporting needs to go out, not for you, but for all your 7,000 parties.
And actually, I said we need to report in September, but the first reporting is actually already in March. So I also need to have a way in which I can grow my capability and not wait a year for a big bang. So the 9-month window was too short. But it's also not one big window. I needed to deliver stuff 3 months down the road.
So to recap, it's 7,000 parties collaborating through a data platform, providing data, but also consuming data.
Excellent.
There's a lot of reporting involved. There's a lot of analytics involved. The operational challenges are being solved with a new Salesforce system, but then it impacts downstream the data warehouse. And now you only have 9 months to fix it all.
Yeah.
All right.
Actually, three and a half to
Three
get
and
to
a
the
half.
first
So it
milestone.
gets even better.
Yeah,
Right.
it gets better.
So I guess that's why we're here today. So what led us?
Yeah.
What was the moment where you thought, let's solve it in a very different way?
I think the good thing and the bad thing is that having built these things for quite a while in my life, I knew that it was impossible. So my pessimism, having done this myself, was well-founded. Others might be naive and believe, oh yeah, it's not a problem. I knew we were not going to make it.
Okay.
I also understood the problem of traditional data warehousing and the credibility problem it has with business owners from before, but also from my 6 years at BNP Paribas Fortis, where having been in the executive committee, it was not always easy for me to motivate the budgets, mainly big budgets in reporting and data warehousing, following what seemed to be relatively minor business logic changes. So I had experienced the problem of not being able to translate complexity and cost to business people. And now I find myself again in that situation. The one advantage I have now in this more small organization is that I don't need to convince anyone and I can make drastic decisions on my own, and people will believe me when I say, let's take a gamble, which is more difficult when you make a gamble in a bank. I had never really, I wanted to do this in a bank, I'll tell you that secret. But the forces of resistance in such a large organization, notably inside the army of people who are used to doing this in the very traditional way, those forces of resistance were not to be underestimated.
That feels like an impossible problem. I can really relate. Yeah, we've seen it so many times.
Yeah.
So what was the moment where you just decided for an automation approach? Did you even know that there was an automation possible? What was the moment where in your head you said, all right, now I need to do something?
The automation dream had been, I think, with me since for decades. Since the time that I was a developer myself in data warehouses, where I would indeed appreciate the repetitive work sometimes of things. And the last 6 years at BNP Paribas Fortis, where I had to explain to non-technical people that we needed very substantial budgets on top of the big budgets to change operational systems after a change in business logic, which happens all the time in banks. What the size of the budgets was to do the post-processing in a data warehouse, I realized and I learned that's very hard to explain. So the dream of being much more efficient had been with me, I would say, for a long time. But I'd never really come across a technology and a solution that could really tackle this quite complex challenge. And then we met, and so I don't think Voltspeed had the challenge of explaining the raison d'etre for the product to me. It was like, oh, I've been looking for this for a long time, and now I have an opportunity to do it. It's not just an opportunity, it might actually save my professional life or that situation with that client. The concept didn't come as something new, but I was quite skeptic that it would work, to be frank. And so I asked the team to do a sort of proof of concept, which I said the purpose is to fail. So I think this will fail, but I want to make sure that I've tried it in this situation, because the alternative of not having automation will be dramatic. We will not meet our deadlines, so we will really need to disappoint a lot of stakeholders. The 9 months, the 3 months will not be possible. And I really thought it would fail because I thought it was impossible.
So you tried with the first proof concept or something like that, or not even?
We said
Did you have
we
time for
didn't
that?
have time.
No, you didn't have.
So I think we started somewhere in November, basically giving us the 10 months to the ultimate deadline and like the 4 months to the first milestone. I think we picked the proof of concept smart in a way that if we would feel that it was going to be successful, we could upgrade on the fly to promoting the proof of concept to a real deliverable.
Okay.
And so we picked that quite smart
Yeah.
so that we wouldn't have to throw it away in the unlikely event that it would be successful.
Okay.
So in November 2023, I'm like, I'm going to gamble some money. And I got clearance from my CFO to gamble. I said, if this gamble pays off, then we really have a win. If it fails, we lose the money.
Based on the intuition long ago that this thing should be automatable, it has not yet been.
Yeah.
Let's try it this time. And by the way, it better work because that's the only way to make it in the time window.
Yeah.
But you're skeptical anyway.
I was very skeptical.
Because that's the first time you would see that problem being automated.
Yes, and I appreciated the complexity of it, having done it myself and sold the traditional way so many times in the past. And I really set the expectations of my stakeholders extremely low. And I said, this is going to fail. I'm going to blow money on a proof of concept and blow people's time. And so we embarked on that. And mid-air, I said, stop the POC, upgrade. I think it's going to work. When I started seeing the first results, we didn't wait out the POC. And we said, okay, if we now scale up to the real thing, we will still be able to make the March deadline. The March deadline had to become the April deadline. So we did our March reporting in April for this one time. But ultimately we made that spring deadline. And spoiler alert, we also made the ultimate deadline of September, October.
So if we fast forward and maybe take a back at what has changed compared to the old ways you were talking about earlier, now you are in the new way. Can you compare from your executive position, what's it before, what is it after?
I can't believe it's been not much more than a year and a half, and I would not be the only one to say it. CEO said it last week. We have him on quote because he also runs one of the departments as part of his day job. And he's a non-technician and he doesn't really know what a data vault or a data warehouse or ETL or data warehouse automation is. And he came to me and said, everything is so much different in my department because people are now much more empowered themselves to do things. And I'll explain what that has to do with data warehouse automation in a minute. So data is much more alive. We get more intelligence out of it, more value out of it. And he basically said, I don't know what you did, but it seems to work. So not only did we make the deadline also, by the way, in budget. So we had a budget. So cost was predictable of the development. So we made it on time and the behavior is very different now. Why is the behavior different? Because the automation allowed us to bring the data vault. I will start calling it the data vault now. We brought it back home. We had outsourced it.
Okay.
And why had we outsourced it? Purely out of the need of having competences. So it was a competences outsourcing, not a financial one, but we had outsourced it because we needed a lot of competences, human competences, to maintain the old code, to run the daily ETL. So there's the build and the run component of such systems. And so we had to outsource it over the course of our history because the data complexity became much bigger than the complexity of our organization. We couldn't keep building human capabilities to follow the complexity.
So you extended your skills.
We had to extend our skill set
with a third party.
Yeah.
And now it's back inside.
And now we can bring it back inside. So for the first time in 25 years, we understand our data model. We are now discussing the design of what is in the data vault and what is a key concept, what is not, what is an attribute, and what is a bridge and what is a satellite. So all these things. But it means we're now thinking about our data products. And I mentioned before, Prior to that, we had 100 star schemas, but star schemas are quite complex artifacts, costly to maintain. We made the decision to not, in the first year, not build any. And it's because it's really an ultimate product, and to make deliberate choices on what do we need for reporting, which requires a more basic data structure. And what we're doing now in year 2 is making really deliberate investment decisions in what we uplift to a data product. And so it means that whatever decision we make to make star schemas or information marts is now a deliberate decision which has a proven ROI. So we don't build technical artifacts anymore because the methodology or the outsourcer in all its goodwill prescribes it. We do it because we can use the tool to really selectively uplift certain data structures into data products. So the ROI of our data products is much higher.
You do fewer things.
We do the right things.
But the right things. Okay.
And we now know what the right things are. There's also a strategic value, and that's probably the most important. I've been talking about Valipac, and I did my introduction about Residata, and Valipac being only one of the streams. Our ultimate growth model is that we need to tackle as fast as we can different waste streams, Valipac being just one of them. But we do mattresses, we do oils, we do lubricants, etc. Our growth path is in taking on more of those duties for more groups in industry across Europe.
Okay.
And because always analysis and reporting is a vital aspect, the more agile we are in developing these data products and growing our data structure, the more competitive we are and the more we can fulfill our ultimate purpose, which is to serve as many waste streams as we possibly can. And this was a hindrance before. We could not fulfill our purpose because of our technology.
Yeah. So it's not only that it was outsourced because of the skills that were needed and the data complexity that outgrew the capability of your team. So that's why it was outsourced. Now it's back in, it's automated. There's a new way of collaborating around data between technicians and the business team.
Yes.
You're now very carefully selecting the data products that have the maximum benefit. So you do fewer things, but the right things.
Yes.
They understand what they're doing also from a business perspective, what they're asking, I guess.
They're speaking business language now, and because the generation of the code is now mostly automated.
Yeah, the code is done. So you
can spend more time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. And that enables now Valipac and Residata to think of value creation based on that data.
Yes. 2 years ago, it was impossible to extend our territory because of the cost in our operational systems and our business intelligence system, which was equal. The incremental cost was equal to extend geographically to one new country. Today, for a fraction of that same cost, we can extend to an entirely new material stream in whatever country.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
Because we have reuse of models, we have reuse of concepts, we understand our model. Our code is not the important thing anymore, it's the model. So we can very quickly understand why doing a new material stream in another country would be slightly different, which it is. But we start from a model, we can tweak the model, and the code generation follows.
That's really the reason why we created WorldSpeed, and that's our core belief. It's such a great pleasure, just as an echo, to see how it is applied in the real world and creating value. Maybe a different question on the dynamics in the team.
Yes.
What is your experience here? Because I guess the role of the people changes a bit. The way they think about this whole thing. How did you make that happen? And what is the lesson learned for people listening to us?
I mentioned before that I did manage to do the automation in the big organization of a bank, also because the systems are so critical and taking a bet is not something that people like to hear. One of the reasons I understand now, Patrick, is that I looked at it as a technical challenge. Will the tool be able to generate code? Now with this experience, I understand it probably also needs you to rethink the roles and the way product ownership and data ownership in an organization. Why do I say that? The people in charge in the old model were basically the ETL programmers. It's often referred to as not the most sexy job in the world. Data science, data engineering, not the most sexy thing. But at the end of the day, it's them that understood the business logic and all the translations they had to make. They were the most knowledgeable, and they are also the bottleneck. So they hold the impact and the power and basically the ownership. Now, what we did in the same guise is we said, we're going to tear down the walls between IT and business, and the business ownership, the product ownership, needs to resign with business people who prior to this said, whoa, we don't have anything to do with that. We are the user. We will tell you what we need.
Did you train them in modeling techniques?
Not in the
needed?
intricacies of a data
No.
vault modeling, but we put the responsibility of explaining what their data was about, why a product would be relevant, what they did to it with their users. That responsibility came with them. And because the translation due to the technology, the translation between the articulation of the business need and the ultimate code that fulfills it, that has become so much automated. It's a next level people that model it, but we can spend more money and time with those people because we spend less time with coders.
Yeah. Okay.
The job profile has totally changed. I can tell you, we did this critical project with 2 junior people from one of our partners, but who had never built a data warehouse before, who had never used your product before, who had never built a data warehouse. Maybe that's an advantage. So they were not methodologically biased.
Yep.
So they were open. They were just bright people with a business training, not even an IT training, who were good at understanding if we gave them a data model and explained what a data model does, using VaultSpeed, generating the code and doing all the technology work. The prior team, with a lot of respect that I have for them, because I used to be one of them, they were of a totally different profile. Hardcore data engineers and developers, which by nature, because they had to spend so much trouble on doing all the plumbing and the coding, etc., had less bandwidth to delve into the business challenges. So the model of people involved in the project during development, but also now during run and growth, is totally different. And another thing, if I may add, because I mentioned the word run, we had daily run considerations before, almost daily. Because
File missing or
something
mistakes,
changed and this and that. Another area where I was skeptical was, will this VaultSpeed thing run? Building something is one thing,
Yep.
but will it run day and night, and will I sleep at night?
What's the quality of the code, actually?
The quality of the code, the stability of the run, etc. Because I told my team, we make the annoying mistake of sending out the report every morning, the dashboard, which is always up to date, but we notify with an email at 7 a.m., which is basically before the IT people see it. So we send it to the business people before the IT people see it, which is like taking a risk, because what you don't want is a CFO calling saying the report and the dashboard is not okay. But we can afford to do that because we know that it's reliable also to execute. And because the whole coding after the model, it seems to be less error prone.
So there is less stress at the breakfast table.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think in now a year, and we're in production since March, of more than a year. I can honestly tell you, it's not because you gave me something to drink or to eat. We've never had to say the data are not there because of that software. If the data were not there, it was because of the data not being in the source system or wrong in the source system. So for me, from a perspective of having the accountability of running things, it's also a cost saver and a credibility saver.
So the thing runs.
So it works.
It works. Thank you, Joe, for that. Maybe a final consideration, maybe lessons learned for executives and leaders confronted to that kind of problem. Your personal recommendation.
I'll answer that question from my personal growth path. What I've come to realize is to position the investment in doing such a project or taking the gamble of switching this you really need to stop and think about the strategic implications and not consider it purely as a technology efficiency booster. Oh, we will generate a table 2 minutes faster or 2 days faster even.
Yeah.
The big motivator to do this is that it has enabled us to do business-wise things faster, better, and become more competitive because we can be so much more efficient in that area of our technology. And that is a totally different game in motivating the why and also the investment that you still need for such a project. I didn't even fully appreciate it when I started this project. It was maybe, I need to get this technological challenge done in 9 months, and how am I going to do it? Now, with hindsight, I understand that the impact is even bigger. And I now see what we can do in terms of business,
Yeah.
how we can respond to an
It's so-
RFP, because we too need to sell new information streams, but new information streams about new waste streams. We can now propose solutions cheaper, faster, and then it becomes a no-brainer. And nobody cares that we built a star schema 1 day faster. It's
Yeah.
just a different ballgame.
Thank you for that. You know, we have speed in our name, Volt Speed.
True. But you also have Volt, which might make it think that it's about the Volt and it's strategy speed for me,
Yes.
or execution speed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we always have those two conversations. I've been there thousands of times. But thank you for that, because actually speed was necessity for you because of the short time window. The other way
Yes.
to make it on time
Yes.
was to automate it all.
Yes.
But then now in retrospect, speed is also a critical business advantage for you to
If it's just a
respond.
development thing, people will go and ask you,
It's a
okay,
one-time thing.
you paid it once, good. Now it's
No.
no longer relevant
Now-
because
now you
we've
have
done the
speed.
migration,
Yeah.
but now we have business speed and business agility.
Okay, that's the one.
That's why the subscription also remains very relevant.
Thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Look forward
Right.
to keep doing this.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.